White Sox fans, welcome in to the Sunday Funday edition of Sox On Tap. It's Tony Marchese alongside NWI Steve. We're here to break down just a pitiful series out in New York, preview another potentially terrible series for our Chicago White Sox up in Toronto. Steven, before I get to all the formalities here, how you doing, my friend, on this fine Sunday night?
Heyo, Anthony. I continue to exist. That's about the extent of what I can say. This baseball team that we follow and devote so much of our time to did not give us a whole lot of things to be positive about this past weekend. Unfortunately, it was to be expected, but, sometimes you want to be a little bit surprised, but we weren't that lucky this weekend.
No surprises this weekend for the White Sox, Steven, and wins would have been surprising here in this series. I know I was unable to join you and Jonathan on the midweek show, but I probably would have predicted this one to go exactly as this went. As we talked a little bit about before we hit that go live button, just too many guys in that New York Yankee lineup that can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and that's what they did all series long. You are a big fan of the multi-home run strategy, and that was deployed against us pretty well, and that's why we titled this Bombed in the Bronx, Steven. So any initial thoughts?
You get out homered 8-1 in a 3-game series, things generally aren't going to go your way. And we can talk all we want about the home runs of the Mickey Mouse variety that we saw here today. At the end of the day, the Sox have the opportunity to take advantage of the little Mickey Mouse ballpark that they play in that shithole that is the Bronx, but they weren't able to take advantage of it. And as we like to say frequently, ball go far, team go far. And there's a reason why the Yankees right now are hot. They've won, I think it's 6 or 7 straight. I know they had swept the Twins, kind of just doing a dress rehearsal for October maybe. But they have the best record in the American League right now, and they're showing why at the moment.
Very well said. Just to read these off real quick, Friday night's ball game, Sox dropped that by a score of 4-2. Saturday was pretty ugly, 6-1. That was Brad Keller's potentially final start in a White Sox uniform. We'll get to that in just a bit. And then today's ball game is 7-2 final. I didn't really feel like the Sox were in any of these ball games except for the early innings today, Steve. Obviously, the offense sort of jumped out a little bit in the early innings today, gave you maybe a little false sense of hope that they can manage to get through one. Facing former White Sox hurler Carlos Rodon, I believe. Were you in attendance for anything special for him, Steven?
I was not.
Ooh.
I was giving consideration to being in attendance for that night on that cold April. I was there the following evening, but I was not there for the game that you are referencing here. But one thing I want to kind of touch on and push back on a little bit, I think the game on Friday, I feel like they actually had some opportunities in that game to steal one there. They had numerous innings where they had guys on base and just weren't able to get a pivotal hit. This has been a problem for this team all season long, their inability to come through with runners on base and runners in scoring position in particular. And Friday night, that was a premier example of that. You look in that 8th inning there, it's a 4-1 game. They were able to push 1 run across, and then they had 2 runners on base there with less than 2 outs. I think it was Eloy and Andrew Vaughn coming up and just couldn't even move a guy further along than that. And there were a couple of other instances earlier on in the ballgame when they could have put more runs across the plate right there to, like I said, go and try to steal a game there. These last 2 games, they were just bombed out completely here. They had an early lead here today, thanks to Corey Julks, but promptly went and gave it right back. And at the end of the day, the Yankees just have simply too much firepower in their offense right now for a team like the Sox to be able to sustain.
Fair enough. Looking over the Friday box score, this is a Mike Clevinger start. What did you think that we got out of Clevinger in this ball game? Obviously, I'll read the line here in just a second, but he's not new to the White Sox rotation, but obviously signed with the team late. Comes up, he gives only 4 2/3 innings pitched. Gives up 3 earned runs, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, and 5 hits, 1 long ball. There, his ERA sits at a 5.56 so far in his early season. Steve, there was some, we can debate the John Schriffen stuff all we want to with blue in the face. However, I do want to get into the fact that there was a comment made in this start that he was starting to find it and feel it out a little bit. I didn't really get that sense. I was curious what your thoughts were from Clevenger's start on Friday.
I was not impressed by what I saw from him there. There wasn't really anything that jumped out to me as kind of turning a page a little bit or getting on track or finding it, as John Schriffen liked to say during this outing. It was just kind of meh, and I think in some ways, I even think he got away with a couple of pitches during the course of that start there to Juan Soto in particular. Soto didn't miss any of those opportunities in the game on Saturday against Brad Keller. So, but there wasn't a crispness to Mike Clevenger's stuff from what I saw personally.
No, it definitely didn't look like the stuff we saw last year either. I was curious what your thoughts were on the start. Obviously, left a lot to be desired is sort of where I left off with that one. And you are right when you say that this was one that the Sox probably could have snuck across. The offense just was not working. Steve, this was sort of the first experience of a man that showed up today on Sunday with Corey Julks in a White Sox uniform. In his, I believe this was his debut, did manage to get a hit, struck out twice there, but found himself back in the lineup throughout the weekend. And today made some really great plays. Not only did he hit a home run, his first home run in a White Sox uniform to get the Sox out to an early lead, also robbed, I think, potentially might be the catch of the year in a White Sox uniform. Schriffen got excited for it. I got excited for it. I don't know if you got excited for it, but that's probably the highlight of the White Sox weekend, at least to me, was that robbed home run, because this could have been 9 home runs to 1 home runs if it wasn't for Corey Julks. And that made me sort of excited. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that was a hell of a play by Corey Julks out there. Between that and the home run that he hit earlier in the game, I think he had another base hit in a later at bat. I mean, he's already made more contributions positively than Noodle Boy has in, almost a year and a half at this point, or a year and a quarter, I should say. So I kind of joked about this a little bit on twatter.com, said, hey, give Julks Noodle Boy's position. Only I kind of really wasn't joking, I mean, I'm very comfortable with just playing whoever happens to be hot for any period of time over there in left field, as long as it makes me not have to see Noodle Boy anymore. But we know that's not going to happen.
I know you're not going to get that wish just based on the contractual status of one Andrew Benintendi here, Steven. So, I feel for you during these trying times. However, I just don't think you're going to get your wish. That said, there was another interesting lineup decision that was made with Eloy Jimenez getting a start out in right field. I was surprised that he didn't injure himself today, trying to rob a home run himself. I thought that was some growth. I don't know about you, but the outfield positions have been largely a rotating carousel of the same type of stuff maybe that we've seen for quite a while now, when it doesn't include Luis Robert Jr. Any thoughts on Eloy getting the start and right? And, would you advocate for Julks seeing more time in right field if Andrew Benintendi is going to get slotted in the lineup and Tommy Pham's going to play center field? Would you advocate for more time with Julks in right and maybe say Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets platooning at first base, DH?
Yeah, that'd be fine. I think, like I said, anything to kind of have more professional outfielders on the field would certainly behoove this team. And I think everybody knows that despite this, brief little, I don't even know if I want to call it a hot stretch from Andrew Vaughn, I think everybody pretty clearly understands where my position is on him at this point. I just don't think that there's enough there.
That's an interesting topic because he has really found the long ball, so to speak. Not so much this series, but leading up to this time.
Well, Anthony,
microphone.
I mean, here's the thing, Anthony. Andrew Vaughn has hit 3 home runs this season with me in attendance. He's hit 0 when I'm not in attendance.
You might have to get out to the ballpark a little bit more. We're not superstitious here. We're just a little stitious. And, so I think that's sort of a pattern that we've recognized now that, you're part of the success plan for Andrew Vaughn when he's in the batter's box. He wants to know that you're there in attendance so that he can hit the long ball, give you some fireworks. That's not a bad thing. That said, I mean, maybe we just need to get you out to the ballpark a little bit more. Well, I mean, the only problem though is, having to get on an airplane and go be around all those sweaty grease balls over in the Bronx. And you see those pictures of the ballpark, Merck, would take a picture of it from the press box there, and you can just feel the grease just oozing off of those sweaty, disgusting people in the Bronx walking around in their Dago tees and just their unbuttoned jerseys that say Ruth on the back, because nobody could guess who wears number 3 for the New York Yankees. You have to put the last name on there, because otherwise how the fuck would I know who it was? And just like I said, you see the picture of that place, you just feel disgusting. So the idea of having to get on an airplane and having to go there, it doesn't particularly entice me. No, you don't want to sit in right field out there in the short porch? I actually did that in the old ballpark. Do we want to reminisce for a brief second here? Go for it. Go for it. Story time with Steve. The 2008 season, last season in the old ballpark, I ventured out to Old Yankee Stadium. And, when the schedule came out the prior September, obviously knowing that was going to be the stadium's final season, I'm talking to some of my friends from high school and guys I played ball with in college, be like, hey, we got to take a road trip out there. Was this your first time out? Was this your first time out to see that stadium? That was my first time. Yeah. And so, for a year, I'm talking to people. I'm like, hey, we got to do this. We got to go see it. It's Yankee Stadium and everything. And everyone's like, oh yeah. We're going to do it. Keep getting closer. Everybody's backing out. Everybody's like, oh, I can't make it. So I end up getting on a plane and going out there by myself. And I went there for 2 games. It was an interesting proposition. So it was 2 games. It was a 3-game series. Got out there for the second and the third games. Second game, or excuse me, the first game I'm out there, I have my seats in right field. So I'm amongst the bleacher creatures, as they like to call themselves. I get there nice and early. I'm watching Ken Griffey Jr. hit batting practice, and I'm actually having a conversation with a longtime Yankee fan, from the Bronx there. He's there with, his kid, maybe, 10, 11 years old. We're talking, and Griffey's hitting BP, and this ball's coming right at me here. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get a home run ball from Ken Griffey Jr. And the guy just sticks up his big meaty paw and just catches it literally right in front of me. This is sort of reminiscent of Andrew Benintendi trying to catch the ball yesterday on Saturday, and the kid got it from him. It was very similar to that. Yes. Oh. Yes. You could definitely draw some parallels to that. So anyway, in this game, Clayton Richard started the game for the Sox. And for any of our listeners who don't know this, when I was a junior in high school, playing in the state tournament, my high school team, we actually beat Clayton Richard in the state tournament that year. And so seemingly there was a period of time there for a couple of years where anytime I would go see the Sox on the road, I would always get a Clayton Richard start. So I go out there. He actually throws the ball very well for like 6 1/3 innings. And the Sox have a 2-1 lead, bottom half of the 7th inning. And a couple runners come on base. And at the time, Mike McDougal was on the staff. So Ozzie goes, makes a pitching change, brings in McDougal, and all the Yankee fans are like, oh, God, no, they're bringing in McDougal. Oh, they're going to get out of this inning. And I looked at these people, and I told them, I go, this is a wild pitch waiting to happen. 2 pitches later, what the fuck happens to tie the game? They all just turn and look at me, and I said to them, I've seen this fucking movie before. This isn't my first time. So, Steve. But they,
surprisingly, I had my Bobby Jenks jersey on there. They surprisingly weren't really giving me any shit. I think they were more impressed and almost respectful of the fact that I was, someone that had a sense of what I was watching and knew some of the bullshit that I had to deal with my team.
There you go. There you go. I think the one thing that I learned from this story is that you were the proud owner of a Bobby Jenks jersey. That has not made an appearance since the Sox on Tap days. What happened to the Bobby Jenks jersey?
It is in a closet somewhere at my parents' house, I believe. I have not worn a jersey. The last time I wore a jersey to a baseball game would have been in May of 2016 when Mark Burley had his number 56 retired.
Interesting. And do you plan on bringing the jersey back out at any point in time, Steven?
No, when I hit the age of 30,
you retired?
I essentially retired, wearing jerseys to the ballpark. To me, there's just something about, and you can make the argument about, you can wear them for guys, that are older than you, or guys that, you watched play when you were in your youth and everything. And, if that's how you personally want to do it, that's fine. To me, there's just something weird about, like if I was wearing a Luis Robert jersey, wearing a jersey of a guy 15 years younger than me. That's just kind of like creep ball energy. That's like something like Ken W.O. would do, like cutting in front of little kids to get autographs at Sox Fest.
It's interesting stuff here. I had a feeling that you were sort of like that as well. I actually don't own any player named White Sox jerseys.
I actually
don't think I ever have.
I've got 4 of them. So I've got the gray Bobby Jenks jersey with the World Series road patch on it. I've got the pinstripe Paul Konerko with the patch that they wore the following year in 2006 for the 05 championship. I've got the black Mark Burley, and then I've actually got the 83 Carlton Fisk. There
you go. Now, see, I'm a hockey sweater guy. I like the Blackhawks sweaters. I've got my Hossa jersey. I've got a Chris Chelios. I actually own 2 Hossas and a Chelios. And
now, does Hossa own a Hossa jersey?
And one Kaner jersey that I came into. So I haven't bought a jersey of somebody who's younger than I am at this point in time, Steve. I completely understand that. I'm curious in the comments, if anybody's listening, how you guys feel on this hotly debated topic. But I know our co-host Johnny is a big jersey guy. Our guy Ron Luce is a big jersey guy. There's a lot of jersey guys here on Tap Sportsnet. I don't think we've ever really formally got into this discussion, Steven. It's very interesting.
Joey Ricotta throwing some heat at me here right now, man.
You must be too cool for jerseys. This is big news here. It's developing stories right now live on Sox on Tap Sunday. Funday.
I'm out here catching strays.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy times. Steve, I don't have much else to talk about in terms of this White Sox series in New York. It was pretty abysmal by every stretch of the imagination. Did you have any final thoughts from New York, man?
Like I said, it pretty much went as expected. I thought that the team was going to get swept coming into this series, just knowing the struggles that they have had playing in New York over the course of the last 15 years since they moved into this new ballpark. And
it's been a long time.
It has
way
been
longer than it feels like. It feels like yesterday the news was, hey, we're building a new Yankee Stadium.
Well,
and we're still complaining about this fucking right field short porch.
One other funny story I'll tell you about that trip that I made to Old Yankee Stadium in 2008. So the second day that I was there and I was doing the tour of the old ballpark, and I'm standing in line. It's maybe 10 o'clock in the morning here, and I'm a little bit hazy. I had a couple 2-tree pops, at the hotel, the night before when I got back from the game and everything. And I'm standing in line. All of a sudden I look up, and about 10 feet away from me, Mark Burley, Paul Konerko, and Don Cooper are just standing there drinking their coffee in shorts and T-shirts. And then a construction worker goes and gives them hard hats, and they were apparently going to take a tour of the new ballpark as it was being built.
There you go. Another interesting Steve from the Road story right there for all the listeners. That's fantastic.
So
they didn't invite you along?
They didn't. I tried to work my way into that, but alas, I was not successful in my attempts there, unfortunately. But as it relates to this weekend here, like I said, this pretty much all just went how I thought it was going to go, sadly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Not exactly the best series for the White Sox. Probably one of the worst of this season. Although those are stacking up quite frequently.
Seventh series sweep of the year already.
Yeah, that's not.
It's not what you want to see.
No, it's not. What are we on pace for right now, Steven? I know you keep the pace tracker for White Sox losses. What are we sitting at?
Hold tight here.
Are we still in record bad territory?
Hold on. This isn't going to help things, so I'll tell you that right now. Boy,
it's going to be bad.
Yeah. Well, we've dropped back down to 48.
48 wins is what you're saying here.
Yeah, 48.
It's not enough victory beers for me.
No, 48 and 114. That's not going to be. That's not what you want to see happen right there.
And things can get drastically worse still because
the schedule here over the course of the next month is it's ugly, if we're being honest with ourselves here. So
do you want to highlight that? I know we're going to talk a little bit about Toronto, but I do want to take a look at the road ahead here because starting with this Yankee series, man, it's really a juggernaut through the end of this month. And then it continues to go from there.
Oh, it's honestly, it's for the next 5 weeks. If we're talking about this year,
really see a break until you get to Detroit, and then that's not even a guarantee. And you've got the Braves and the Dodgers after that.
Well, yeah. So here's, you got 3 up in Toronto starting tomorrow, and that's another place that they have not played well for the last 15 years. I think they've won 1 series up there since 2012. Like that place has also been a house of horrors for them in a lot of ways. And then you come home and you get the Baltimore Orioles for 4. Nice, good, young, upstart team that had the best record in the American League a year ago. Yeah, so have fun with that. Then you get Toronto coming in, starting on Memorial Day for 3 right there. Then you go on the road to Milwaukee for 3, a team leading the NL Central. Then you get an off day on June 3rd. And then you play the Cubes at that other place for 2. And then you got the Ginger Sox coming in for 4. Then, hey, listen, these are totally going to get easier because then you go out to the West Coast. And we know the Sox always do well out there. You get 4 in Seattle, 3 in Arizona. So really maybe the only break in the schedule here is, you get on the 18th, you come home for 3 with Houston, but they're starting to play better. And then you go to Detroit, and then you come home 3 with the Dodgers and a makeup with my Barbs before the red hot Colorado Rockies come in the last 3 days of June to reignite the rivalry and the battle for Juan Uribe.
That's going to be a tough rivalry series there to close out the month of June. But this could be a worse stretch of the season than what you saw in early April. Very easily.
Yeah, it really has the potential for that here. You just have to hope that you get a couple of games in there where the offense finds itself. And I know we had a little bit of a setback here this week. Maybe Luis Robert Jr. is back maybe in 10 days to 2 weeks or so. Because that's obviously someone that you need to get back in the lineup here to provide just another professional hitter and some semblance of power to this lineup. Because there's just not enough consistency offensively in here. And, maybe if you are in a position where you have Thomas Pham, Luis Robert Jr. in there, Corey Lee, he's been in a little bit of a funk here this weekend, which, look, that was going to happen. We talked about this. There was going to come a point where some of the advanced scouts were going to come out there and they were going to start finding some things on him. And it's now going to be incumbent upon him to adjust back. And we'll see the changes that he made over the course of the winter, what's going to stick and what isn't ultimately. So, but just having another viable major league hitter in the lineup is something that this team desperately needs. So the sooner Luis Robert Jr. can get back, the better off that this thing is going to be.
Absolutely. We've got a couple listener questions in here. We're going to get to those in just a moment. You brought up a name that has been talked about a little bit in some trade rumors that I saw rumbling around online over the past 24 hours ish, and that is Luis Robert Jr. I believe Jeff Passan said something about look at the Seattle Mariners as a potential landing spot for Luis Robert Jr. As we get closer to this, and obviously he's been on the shelf for quite a while right now, Steven, I really haven't thought that the White Sox are going to explore this. Do you believe that this is noise, or if there's something potentially credible about, the White Sox looking to trade him this season? I know that's only going to get more airtime as we near the MLB trade deadline, but as of right now, I just don't see it. I need your thoughts here.
Well, I wrote about this over towards the tail end of spring training after the Dylan Cease deal with the San Diego Padres happened, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you might as well just trade Robert now." Given where he's at from a contractual standpoint, and knowing that there is one more guaranteed year and then the two relatively affordable option years on there, the return that it would take to get a player of his caliber would be exorbitant for most teams. Now, obviously, he's coming off of an injury here. He's missed over a month already. He doesn't have a great health history. If we're being completely honest with ourselves here, when he is on the field, it's very obvious what type of a dynamic player he is. You can definitely make a case that he's one of the top 10 players in the sport when he's healthy fully. Just what he can do on both sides of the ball. He's an extremely exciting guy. So I'm tempted to say that it would be very hard to see a deal come together, I think, especially during the course of the season and now coming off of this extensive injury here. But if Jeff Passan says something, this isn't like Boob saying it or Bruce
That's
Levine.
the part that scares me.
Yeah. For Jeff Passan, I mean, the guy who is either number 1 or 1A with Ken Rosenthal in terms of best, most respected national reporters for Major League Baseball, that kind of makes you stop and take stock of things a little bit right now. And seeing some of his comments about the Seattle Mariners being viewed by prospect evaluators and even some team executives as having maybe the best crop of positional prospect talent outside of the Baltimore Orioles. That's fascinating to hear. I mean, again, I don't want the Sox to trade Luis Robert Jr. I know everyone is in this mindset of, they're not going to win with him. You might as well move him now and get whatever you can. I'm still of the mindset that if Chris Getz and, some of the new front office regime that he's brought in with my guy Brian Bannister and Jesse Barfield and some of the other changes that they've made, if they believe that they can turn this thing around quickly, and that's a relatively loose term right there. I said in the article that I wrote, if by next July, if they think that they can be a playoff team in 2026, you have to hold on to Luis Robert Jr. and give yourself 2 shots. If by next July this thing still isn't where you realistically feel that you can be a playoff team in 2026, then yes, you have to, at that point, give it serious consideration. I still just personally feel like it's too early to do this.
I'm sort of right there with you on it, and you pretty much gave this a good baseline here. I also feel that you're still going to get really good value out of a deal with Luis Robert Jr., even if it's next season at that trade deadline, or even with the 2 option years at that affordable rate. I look at this and I sort of think, man, hey, this is the $100 million plus player that this team is not going to go out and get in free agency and not going to trade for and acquire, and you have him on a deal that is well below market value for his talents. I understand the need to move him, but like, you need a star if you're going to try and turn this thing around. If they trade him, it completely 100% in my mind signifies they're not attempting to make the playoffs until 27, 28, because you're going to need 3 or 4 years then for those guys to develop. And this is a complete reset. And there won't be, but there will need to be some organizational messaging from this front office that is yet to give White Sox fans any sort of clear direction. If you move on from that franchise type player that you're not going to be able to acquire and haven't been able to acquire in the past, and trade him for more, we'll even call them lottery tickets. Look at what happened with the Chris Sale deal. Like, I think we need to take some stock in this and say, what panned out from that?
I think we took stock in it over the winter, Anthony.
We did. You and I did. We went back and we did the homework on it. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to everybody listening to this show.
Oh no, I think people at this point fully understand.
That's not guaranteed. It's an incredibly risky move to move on from Luis Robert Jr. There is not anyone else in this White Sox organization that has the tools or the ability to get to that ceiling as of right now. I don't. Do you have a name for me that can get there?
The only one that you can make a case for it is Colson Montgomery, but I don't even think that that's fair, given the defensive questions that still persist about him being able to handle the shortstop position. There was very little doubt by the time he got to Double-A Birmingham that Luis Robert was going to be able to handle and be a premier defensive center fielder. And when you have a premier defensive center fielder that can hit you 30 home runs, that is one of the most valuable things in the sport. The only thing that really comes close to that from a value perspective is if you have a solid or a well above average defensive shortstop that hits 30 home runs a year. Like those two things right there are right on par with each other. And I just don't think from nothing I've read to this point, I don't see Colson Montgomery having that defensive upside right there to be able to equate to Luis Robert Jr.
So again, the only reason I see to move on from him is that this is going to be a 2 or 3 year slog where we're stuck in this. Then that's fine. If that's the decision that Chris Getz makes, then that's his decision to make. I just, as the fan sitting here right now talking on the show, I wouldn't do it. Not at this juncture. You still have time to get a valuable return. Maybe it won't be as great as the one right now, but you can also make the flip side argument that U.S. Sports Cards here in the comments makes. Only way you trade Robert is if he comes back and catches fire. You can't sell him at a low point. You do know that other GMs are out there going to look at this injury history and diminish the value on this, even though he's got a pretty decently high pedigree, and as you said, could be named as a top 10 center fielder, even or top 10 guy in the sport. You're running risks both ways because he can obviously go out there and have another season-ending injury in 2025. But man, like as I said on the Blackout show the other day when I joined them, like we were talking about the same exact conversation. You have to give people a reason to show up to the ballpark. And, right now, outside of like Luis Robert Jr., like Steve, who do you get excited to go see on the Chicago White Sox go play baseball on a day in, day out basis? This is as this was with Connor Bedard when he was injured with the Chicago Blackhawks. Like there's not a lot of like reasons to tune in to watch the guy play right now with this team. I don't know about you. Brian Ramos was for a little bit there, sort of filled the void with some exciting play, but this is a guy that you turn the TV on to watch play baseball. I just think you're going to lose a lot of eyeballs in the short term, and this thing has already dwindled down to the point where it's close to unbearable for some people. I know that people like to make a huge deal about not watching the White Sox earlier this season. Let's give people another reason to not watch the Chicago White Sox.
I mean, a couple things to unpack there as far as, guys to show up to the ballpark to watch. Right now, the way that he has thrown this year, Garrett Crochet is someone in that equation for me, as someone that enjoys dominant starting pitching. I know he had a couple starts in there that didn't go particularly well, but he has
another name that's getting tossed around in this.
But he has certainly rebounded well from that, and that's someone that I've enjoyed being in the ballpark watching him pitch this season. So he's somebody that would fit that description for me personally. And if they did decide to end up moving Luis Robert Jr. here, that calls into question a couple of different things here. It calls into question comments that Chris Getz made when he said that this wasn't a rebuild, and that this was expected to be a quick turnaround. If you're moving Luis Robert Jr., you're signaling that wasn't the case. And at the same time, you're also calling into question remarks that were made by Satan himself, Jerry Reinsdorf, when he justified not doing an extensive external search and just handing the job to Chris Getz, the guy that oversaw the poor performance in the minor league development system here, and saying that you couldn't go outside because he doesn't have a lot of time left and he doesn't want to go through an extensive rebuild process. That's flying in the face of those comments right there if you go out and if you trade Luis Robert Jr. here. So I doubt that anybody that follows this team with media credentials would dare to ask those questions when the chairman comes out of his hole, to do one of his, annual philanthropic events where he's getting praised and making jokes about, not being competitive enough and getting laughs out of people and everything. I doubt anybody that has access to him would dare follow up on that right there. But it's something that anybody in this town that with a media credential and a backbone would ask.
We'll leave it at that. We've got a couple questions to get to. We'll take the first one here from Joey Ricotta, our guy at On Tap Sportsnet over at Cubs on Tap, found himself in here in the show. He was already giving Steve some heat. I'm sure Steve's going to like this question as well. What would you guys want in a Michael Kopech trade to the north side? I haven't really scouted the north side prospects, and to be honest, I don't really know what Michael Kopech is worth at this point in time, Steve. You're looking at a guy who, can we call him a failed starter at this point? I think we can call him a failed starter. He's been up and down when it comes to the closing role. Maybe he's an eighth inning guy. I'm not really sure what Michael Kopech is 100%, because there are days where he looks absolutely fucking dominant out there on the mound. And there are other times where Michael Kopech gets touched up more than I would like somebody in a closer role to get touched up for. And those are all evident in the stats for Michael Kopech. And at this point, I know the Cubs are looking for bullpen help, so there's obviously some sort of matchup here. There's been some noise within media and blog circles about the potential unison between these two teams. I don't know if I want to move on from Michael Kopech, knowing that the return just probably isn't what I would want from this. But again, at the same time, like, holding on to that asset is, I just don't know, man. This one's really tough for me to answer. You got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, my thoughts are this. I think Michael Kopech will likely be in a different uniform come late July. As far as the return that I would expect for him, for a guy that he's got a couple positive things on his side. Obviously, we've seen the fastball velocity tick up here in the relief role from where he was, in the last couple of years as a starter. And the strikeout rates are good. He misses a ton of bats, but he's got two things really working against him. He does have control issues still. And one thing that you really can't afford to do when you're playing a lot of close games is having relievers come in and walk themselves into jams. Now, he's been fortunate in the sense that he is able to pitch over that in certain instances because he can miss bats. And it might not be as bad of a situation going to a team like the one on the north side that actually plays sound fundamental defense. So if the ball does get put into play, it won't necessarily be as detrimental to him. The other problem that he has is he's got a little bit of a home run ball issue right now here. We've seen that a couple of times this year. And, we know that, some of the little Mickey Mouse home runs that ballpark can give up because of the baskets out there. So those, I think, are just two things that could be a little problematic for Michael Kopech. As far as, a potential return, you're not going to get a top 100 prospect from Michael Kopech. I'm going to throw some water on this right now for anybody that's listening. That's just not going to happen here. So you're going to get somebody, I would say, like maybe in the 5 to 10 range for any organization out there. So, whether that's a positional player or a pitcher, I think there's a lot of conjecture with that. One thing that it does kind of seem like Chris gets.
I've got a very interesting question for you.
Okay.
Can you get a better return than you got for Jake Berger for Michael Kopech?
I think it probably would be on par with that.
Because that's sort of where my comp is. And I'm going to say that I feel that was still potentially maybe an undervalue deal where the White Sox wound up giving away someone, although Berger has had some injury issues as well, really cooled off. You haven't heard his name much in the news down in Miami, but the return sort of seems on par with what you would get for me to Michael Kopech in the Jake Berger trade. Maybe a 1-for-1 swap for a mid-tier guy in someone else's farm system.
Yeah, I think that could be a reasonable return right there. It seems to me like Chris Getz and company, one of the things that they're doing is trying to stockpile as much starting pitching as possible. I think we know that this team doesn't like going into the free agent market for starting pitchers, even less than they do position players there. So maybe the idea and what Chris Getz is trying to do here is trying to have as much starting pitching surplus at the minor league level as he possibly can, and hoping that guys are going to eventually ascend to the rotation at the corner of 35th and Shields and pan out. And then maybe some of the other ones there that Bannister and some of the other scouts look at and say, okay, this is somebody that we think we can move because we have a quote unquote surplus to try to fill some of those positional holes that are littered across the diamond right now, if we're being honest with ourselves.
Yeah, good point. I want to get to this other question, U.S. sports cards here. I thought this was a really, really good one. Which segment of the pitching staff do you feel holds more short-term value for the White Sox, either on the field or as trade bait, bullpen arms, or the starters? I'm going to attack this from a trade bait side, Steve. I would go with the starting rotation, just with Eric Fetty, man. That has a good potential return written all over it. I don't know if it's going to be as valuable as people think it's going to be, just like we sort of cautioned with the Michael Kopech stuff, but you add in names like Chris Flexen to that as a potential trade piece. Garrett Crochet, if he is moved, I think probably nets a very nice return. So if you want to talk about the starting rotation as a whole, you can also add in a guy like Mike Clevenger. If he can turn it around, you've got like a whole rotation worth of guys that are pretty much movable. Arguably more so than a bullpen, because outside of Michael Kopech and John Brebbia, who are you really going to move and get anything from here? You're not moving Schuster, Steve. I just really don't see anybody in the bullpen that holds a ton of value outside of him in terms of long-term, potential to to grow into a role here? I know this is a short-term question, but like Schuster's probably that only name outside of Michael Kopech that I feel is movable. Brevia's been touched up a lot. Wilson's gotten touched up a lot. There's not a lot out there. We've seen a DFA train almost from the Chicago White Sox bullpen at this point. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the starting rotation definitely is the one that you'll get more value out of here. And I think you touched on it with Erick Fedde. I think that's the biggest piece right now. And I know early on in the season, I was of the mindset of, hey, why are we talking about trading guys like Erick Fedde and Garrett Crochet? Because again, you need to eventually at some point hold on to good players and use them to build a viable major league team.
Not when you're in a perpetual rebuild.
Well, I don't want to be in perpetual rebuild. I'm fucking tired of it. But my perception on the Erick Fedde thing really changed, maybe 7 to 10 days ago when something was brought to my attention that I simply forgot. Scott Boras. That's a problem. I was forgetting the fact that Fedde is represented by Scott Boras. And I think we've all seen that.
Do you think Scott Boras demands trades in these situations?
No, he's not demanding trades, but I think the organization just has to look at it from this perspective. The likelihood, if Erick Fedde continues to pitch the way that he has for another year and a half, the likelihood of them being able to extend him and add on to his deal right now that is going to expire at the end of the 2025 season just simply isn't great. And especially if this team isn't really in a position where in 2026 they're going to be ready to compete. That changes the calculus quite a bit right there. So I think Erick Fedde is someone that if he continues pitching the way that he has here to start the season, I think he's going to get a decent return right there. He might be able to get you a back end, maybe somebody in the 90 to 100 on a top prospect list right there. You're not going to get, somebody higher than that. Personally, I don't see that. I know I myself have made the mistake of at times overvaluing what the Sox would get in returns for players. And I might be overvaluing that perception right now with Erick Fedde right there, thinking that you could get somebody in that 90 to 100 range on a top 100 prospect list right there. So, but I think that you would at least get a quality return for him on at least one player for Erick Fedde. And Garrett Crochet, this one is challenging. And this is something that actually a friend of the show and somebody that we had on our rebuilt project over the course of the winter, Patrick Nolan, P. Knowles, talked about on twitter.com recently. Teams that are going to be acquiring Garrett Crochet theoretically here in 2024 are acquiring him for August and September and into October. Garrett Crochet, on Tuesday is going to surpass his innings high point in a season at any time of his career. So we don't know what he's going to be when that calendar flips to August. And our team's
an excellent thought from P. Knowles too, by the way. Throw that out there here because I read that as well, and that was something that I don't think a lot of people took into account.
I know I didn't, and that was something where I saw that, and that really kind of made me stop for a second and think about that. And he's right. You don't know what you're going to get from him at that point in the season. A month from now, in mid-June, we don't know where things are going to be. Is the velocity still going to hold the way that it has to this point? There was, a couple start dead arm period there. It stands to reason that we're going to see one of those again.
Could a team theoretically take a flyer on him in a bullpen role?
They could. I mean, they certainly could. They could see, where he's at.
Because that's what I sort of was thinking too, as like a side to that comment from P. Knowles out there on the X machine was, maybe it's not a team that wants a starting pitcher, but they want a guy that can fit into a playoff roster and give you 2 or 3 innings in a playoff series out of the bullpen. and then, take a look at next year when we get to next year. But he's definitely one of those guys that could be a best arm available situation for something like that. You see weird things, and I don't want to. These guys are in two different places in their career, but like look at Lance Lynn going to LA, stuff like that. Just here's another arm that provides you some insurance. He is an unknown commodity though at this point, and that really diminishes the value on the White Sox side, more so than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that is something that will hurt the Sox from a bargaining standpoint because Chris Getz obviously should look to extract as much value as he possibly can. But again, at the end of the day, the other GMs in the league know where Garrett Crochet is at from a volume standpoint this season relative to the rest of his career. And you bring up an interesting point is, given how starting pitchers are managed in the postseason nowadays, where there aren't a lot of guys that are being allowed to face an order a third time through once you get to October. So maybe having Garrett Crochet as a guy that can come in and, especially in a short series, go one time through an order and maybe just buzzsaw through them, that could be the type of thing that tips the scales in a short series right there. So that could be how teams maybe would look to neutralize some of the added stress on his arm. So that's I think an interesting point. But again, I just don't know that the return is going to be as great as people would anticipate, especially if Garrett Crochet continues to throw well here. That's where I'm almost of the mindset that it wouldn't shock me if the idea of moving Crochet is something that doesn't manifest itself here in 2024.
I think we're going to see a lot of these guys. And as we talk through this, I know this was like way too early trade deadline talk Sunday here at Sox on Tap, but I'm glad we're having these discussions now and getting sort of ahead of things. It's going to be a busy deadline for the Chicago White Sox, but I'm going to go out and say I don't think the returns are going to make us as happy as like we want to be with this. It's a lot of middle tier guys. I don't see the White Sox acquiring, unless it is a Luis Robert Jr. trade. I don't see us acquiring anyone that we're going to be like, hey, this is our new, trust the prospects guy.
Here's what I think we have to look at. And I think the mindset that needs to be had. You think about a trade that took place last year, Kendall Graveman, when he went to Houston, and in exchange, the team got Corey Lee. And Corey Lee, former first-round pick, former top prospect, had struggles in his initial cup of coffee with the Houston Astros, came over and did not perform well, as I've documented in his short time with the team in 2023. But that was not a very well-heralded move. And obviously, he's gotten himself off to a nice start outside of this weekend here, and he has played himself into the discussion about, hey, is this someone that's going to be part of a catching combo going into the future here? So this is where you have to have some trust and you have to have some belief in your development people. You have to have trust.
That's easier said than done when we're talking about 100%. The Chicago White Sox.
100%. But if you trust Josh Barfield, if you trust Paul Janisch handling the development side of it here, that's kind of what you have to look for. Is, hey, can we find guys that aren't the top 100 prospects, but guys that we think we can take something and mold into a functional piece on a 26-man major league roster.
Here's the problem that I see when I look at this from a 10,000-foot view is you had really good players that you couldn't get to win. And you flip them for, really, really nice prospects in this last core, so to speak. That included some guys that you drafted, Tim Anderson, a bunch of these guys. Jose Abreu. You look at what we have here, and there was diminishing assets through this entire process. And it has continued to the point where we have to level set now that Corey Lee type players are the hope, right? Because Corey Lee is not guaranteed to be a starting catcher for the Chicago White Sox for the next 5 years. He's had a great start. He's given us some hope. That's more than we can ask for. But even from the mentality from the last sell-off into this one, which is still not deemed a rebuild, it's like I see the assets diminishing into further. We gave the metaphor of the scratch-off lotto tickets, right? You bought a $20 ticket, you won $5. So you went out and you bought a $5 ticket and you won $2. That's where I feel like we're at right now. That's not exactly a good place to be, because unless one of those $2 tickets hits for $100, you're just continuously going down this line of degenerate gambling.
I think that's probably a fair analogy to utilize right there. Until we begin to see concrete improvement from the development side of this, I don't know that most people are going to be thrilled with any return that comes at this point. There's obviously certain people within the White Sox Twitter sphere that are always going to be of the mindset of, this prospect that they got, this is a really good deal. It's going to work out. This guy's going to come up and he's going to be, a solid everyday, to all-star caliber player for this team, no matter who it is. And we've seen plenty of that here. And I know we're seeing some of that talk with guys like Drew Thor already, given the success that he's having in AA Birmingham. And, some of the scuttlebutt is that, he might be making his way up to Charlotte here. And
he's a promote guy from one of your White Sox Twitter favorites, Mr. Matthew Crawford. I saw promote.
Anthony, if you're going to say it, you have to say it correct. Promote!
Not part of your clan.
But like I said, I think at the end of the day is there needs to be just more tempered enthusiasm with the prospects and with any of the returns that they get at this point, until we start to really see tangible proof that this team is able to take some of these prospects and turn them into functional players. So that's the one lasting effect of Rebuild 2.0 and the failures that we highlighted ad nauseum over the course of the winter.
Absolutely. Steven, we got a couple minutes left here. Sox are off to Toronto. Any thoughts, predictions for this upcoming series? It's that time where we've got to give these wonderful predictions for our favorite baseball team and how they're going to fare over the course of their next series. So what do you got?
I hate to say it. Toronto has been a house of horrors for this team for the last 12 to 15 years or so. I know obviously got Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet, two guys that I was just extolling their virtues on a couple minutes ago. But I think this team gets swept again. And I think they go 0-6 on the road trip, which is not what you want to see happen here. Wouldn't it all shock me if Fetty and Crochet throw the ball very well in their two starts? The Blue Jays, just as a team, are not really hitting right now. They're not playing particularly good baseball. But, the Sox are going to run up against Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi, who are both throwing the ball very well. And we've seen the Sox just aren't able to string together consistent offense. And I just am not confident that they're going to be able to go up to a place that even when they've had better offenses and couldn't get the job done, that this group is somehow going to find a way. I just don't see it happening.
So you got 0-3 for the weekend.
I have 0-3, which would make an 0-6 road trip, and that's gonna make me really fucking pissed off Wednesday night.
I'm gonna try and stay optimistic here and give us one victory, one night of happiness through this 3-game series. Interesting note, as you brought up before we started recording, tomorrow's ball game starts at a lovely 2:07 p.m. Central Time. It is a holiday up in Canada, so they are off of work and ready to head on out to a Monday ball game on a, whatever day it is up there. I'm not quite positive. I knew it a couple of minutes ago, but I forgot at this point. So we're going to have to try and watch this one while we, do our thing down here in the United States of America, which is work on this lovely upcoming Monday. But both of the other games in the series will be at the around 6 o'clock, sort of the reverse getaway day schedule here for the Sox. We'll see how that shakes things up a little bit. I don't think that the team is used to playing 2 o'clock games on a Monday. That said, that's it, man. I only have one win this series, and I think it's going to be the Fetty game.
Well, if they are able to do that, that would be a positive. I mean, I would obviously love if they could get the first 2 games of this series with your 2 best starters on the mound. But like I said, I just don't have the optimism given the recent nightmares that have taken place up north of the border.
And that sort of does it for us here today, Stephen. This is a wonderful show. We talked a lot about some potential trades. We got to as many questions as we could. Thanks for everybody who tuned in for this edition of Sox On Tap Sunday Funday, brought to you by OnTapSportsNet.com. Be sure you're heading there for all of your Chicago sports podcasting and literature needs. Stephen will be back Wednesday night, most likely, to recap this series with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's all I got, man. White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.